Welcome to the Inner Core Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting video for you. We are reacting to the Democratic National Convention. And Michelle Obama was one of the headline speakers, and she made a speech that seems to be pretty popular right now. It's kind of trending. I wanted to actually do a reaction video to a young African-American lady who did a reaction to Michelle Obama's speech. And it seems as if in her mind, she's changed her perspective on Michelle Obama. And she, proceeds to critique the speech and to give her input. And I think it's interesting to get that insight because a lot of young African-American young ladies tend to look up to her. She has a relatively high approval rating in the public eye, and I think people generally like her. But in terms of what she stands for and what she represents, is it in line with what people believe? And that's one of the things I want to get the feedback from, especially when it's a female person critiquing her. So with that said, let's jump right into the video and react to it as we go.
Let's watch clip number 1.
We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. We don't get to change the rules so we always win. If we see a mountain in front of us, we don't expect there to be an escalator waiting to take us to the top. No. We will.
Sorry, y'all. Do y'all hear how racist that is? That's crazy. And it begs the question, first of all, who is we? I'm going to insinuate, since this whole crowd of all these different people are cheering, we means people of color, and that's just what she's throwing in. Clearly, she's insinuating Black people, of course. Black people are at the top of the hierarchy when it comes to people of color in leftist ideology. So she said, we don't get second and third chances when we lose our businesses or bankrupt ourselves. We don't get to lie and cheat to make our way to the top. When we're at the bottom of a mountain, we don't expect an escalator to show up. So what she's really meaning is that white people are liars, they are cheaters, they expect everything to be handed to them. White people own this entire system and get to create whatever it is that they want. White people get handed second, third, and fourth chances. How that works, I don't know. Do you white people, let me know. Y'all have a hotline y'all call when you need a second or third chance? And you go through a little questionnaire about your heritage and your skin color, and all of a sudden you're granted that second, third, or fourth chance. I have no idea what the hell this woman is talking about, but she's on the same victimhood arc that she's been on for the entirety of her life, and especially her life in politics at the side of Barack Obama. That is a crazy thing to say. And has she switched out the way she worded this by saying white people lie, white people cheat, and they steal, and they this and that, and they expect an escalator to be set out right in front of them, and they get second and third chances, guarantee she'd be getting a very different response. But because she's talking about the hardship of Blackness and people of color, and people can use that as a crutch so they don't have to take accountability for their own actions, people are going to be cheering this on. And I do have to point out, she's saying we don't have the luxury of the affirmative action of generational wealth, meaning that white people have had access to generational wealth by virtue of their whiteness. People of color haven't, and we don't have that privilege. There are many white people who in no way, shape, or form have benefited from generational wealth, who have no generational wealth, who are in this very moment in our year 2024 trying to build generational wealth for their kids to come, their grandkids to come, and to build their own legacy here in this country. They do not benefit from this privileged affirmative action of generational wealth. There are also many Black and brown people in this country who do have generational wealth, whose parents owned businesses, their grandparents started businesses, their grandparents were doctors, lawyers, all of these different things. And they've been able to pass down that wealth from generation to generation. And now they're sitting in comfort here in 2024. There are also many Black people who don't have access to that. Who are you to speak on behalf of an entire group of people and tell them what they do and do not have access do. What they do.
What I heard when she said that, it sounded like she was taking a veiled shot at Donald Trump. It seems like there's a lot of subtle jabs between them, whether it's her or her husband who takes shots at him. They're not big fans of Donald Trump. So I heard her doing that. I do think she's making a valid point about how it comes across. You know, I guess when Michelle Obama's family started off, maybe they came from humble beginnings, but she's sitting in a very different seat. And it seems like she's attacking the very person that she is, right? If you are the privileged people who have the means, but you speak of it as if you're not, it comes across as disingenuous. And I do think there is a part of that where, you know, they'll play to the crowd. These are talking points that tends to get a lot of applauses. So people go ahead and say things that sounds good, even though they are a direct contradiction to what's being said. And I think that's what this young lady's picking up on.
And do not have the privilege of. And the demeaning way in which she talks about people of color is astounding to me. And to do that and say that to just a huge crowd of applause is insane. Okay. And that is wholly separate from the clear racial undertone in everything that she's saying. If you are a white person who has struggled in life, who did not have access to generational wealth, what did she just say to you? Yes, you did. You're white. And I got to imagine there's white people in the crowd at the DNC. There was thousands of people there that have struggled through their lives as well and have not been handed privilege on a silver platter by virtue of being born white. Yes, they listen to these speeches and they've been so propagandized, so indoctrinated by this like woke speak, white guilt, self-flagellating language that they accept this. And they think that this is an okay thing to say out loud to a group of people who are now going to go on to decide the future of our country and who leads it. Michelle Obama is Delulu with a capital D, which explains why she was at the DNC saying this stuff. Now, beyond that, she talks about her own life, her own family. And let's listen to that clip.
You see, my mom, in her steady, quiet way, lived out that striving sense of hope every single day of her life. She believed that all children, all people have value, that anyone can succeed if given the opportunity. She and my father didn't aspire to be wealthy. In fact, they were suspicious of folks who took more than they needed. They understood that it wasn't enough for their kids to thrive if everyone else around us was drowning. So my mother volunteered at the local school.
In fact, they were suspicious of people who took more than they needed. Okay. Quick Google search of Michelle Obama. What's her net worth? $70 million. $70 million. They were suspicious of people who took more than they needed. And she talks about people who are celebrating in the face of those who are experiencing anguish. It's the privileged versus the underprivileged, the oppressors versus the oppressed. If I recall correctly, we went through a COVID pandemic in our year 2020. And everybody was shut down. Only essential workers, whatever that means, were able to go out into our civil society and conduct themselves and get paid for their work. You had kids out of school. You had people struggling. If I remember correctly, the Obamas had parties during that COVID pandemic when everybody was shut down. And they were hosting people in their little tented area outside of their large mansions and properties. And the elites got together and had a fun day in the sun while everybody was on lockdown and staying in their homes. If I remember correctly, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama have a big ass mansion on Martha's Vineyard and several other properties. You're suspicious of people who have more than they need. And this seems to just be the sticking point, I guess, for a lot of these left-leaning politicians. They make their way into government. They make millions of dollars. In Michelle Obama's case, a net worth of $70 million. How much of that she acquired during his presidency and after, I do not know. How exactly she acquired that much money, I do not know. But she can, I guess, lay out how much is needed, how much of that is necessary, because apparently we're never supposed to have more than we need. But they go into government, they acquire all of this money, and then they talk about taxing the rich. And my parents, were hardworking Americans and they never took more than they needed. Meanwhile, every single day you're taking more than you need according to your own ideology. And I sit on the other end of it saying, that's capitalism, baby. Outside of doing things illegal and, the insider trading that should not be allowed and people should be prosecuted for, I say fair is fair. You want to make money in this country and make more than you'll ever need? That's okay. You take that money, you pass it down to your kids, you build a foundation, you do this and that. I do not care. But to stand on a side that says nobody should ever have more than they need, and we're going to move in a communist direction, and it's all about equity and making sure that everybody is equal. And not only do we have equal opportunity, but equal outcome in this country. And you're sitting on a cool $70 million talking about that as if you don't have access to an abundance of money to make the changes that you're calling for. And your mansion on Martha's Vineyard and your COVID parties and all this different crazy stuff that you guys are engaging in. Give me a break.
Okay, so I'd like to stop here again just to interject and to make a point. I think the young lady again makes a valid point, right? It seems disingenuous when, you speak as if you're representing the common folk, and you criticize the group of people that you're a part of. And for this generation, I think it's the Gen Z generation, they see through a lot of the smoke and mirrors that people try to sell them, right? They see through what they would call the cap. And they typically aren't buying it, right? If it seems disingenuous, they're going to call you out on it. This young lady's relatively young, and she Google searched Michelle Obama and saw that, wait, you're worth like $70 million now. It wasn't the case when you went into the office, but now for some reason, you're making a lot of money, and you are part of the group that while people were being locked down, you guys were out having fun, right? And so this was televised, this was showcased. So now these young people saw that, and they saw the hypocrisy, and they're just not buying this new notion that somehow, some way you're the voice of the people who don't have, when you yourself are standing with the people who do. So another valid point. It's interesting to see how, young people are receiving these politicians and their wives, and whether or not they think they're making valid arguments or not. You can clearly see this lady's now falling for it. Let's continue.
But this is what they do every single election cycle. And they talk as if like there are these, I'm so humbled by my experience and the experience of my parents. And it's almost as though in their elitism, they're trying to come off as the common folk, when you know damn well you're not. So go ahead and acknowledge that, and maybe talk about your experience being on the other end of it as somebody who is now extremely rich, and talk about what you're going to do, because you point to other rich people and tell them what they're going to do, but the finger is never pointing at you, even though we all know how much money you have. It is public information. Quite honestly, maybe 70 million is not the accurate estimate. She probably has more that we have no idea about. But this sort of point fingers down at the rich folk who are creating all of America's problem, while failing to acknowledge that you are very much one of those people. And not only that, you got the money from complaining about the rich people and from building a campaign that's supposed to be for the common folk and for solving their issues and for nobody having more than they need. And now you, for damn sure, have way more than you need, according to your own ideology, according to your own playbook. Now, if that wasn't enough, the talk of white people having escalators to just, I guess, fling themselves to the top of any ladder, of any hierarchy, she goes on to discuss her parents and being suspicious of those who have more than they need. And then she talks about children and children who want to love who they love and be who they want to be. We can all guess what that issue is about. Let's roll the clip.
Demonizing our children for being who they are and loving who they love. Look, that doesn't make anybody's life better. Demonizing our children for being who they are and loving who they love. Look, that doesn't make anybody's life better.
Okay. Being who they are and loving who they love. I love the vagueness, right? Because they can go out and like make these very vague statements that sound super beautiful, but let's really break down what that means. Being who they are is, of course, in reference to gender ideology and transgenderism and gender dysphoria, often experienced by kids in today's day and age at exponentially rising rates, which is just insane. So by being who they are, she means kids either socially or medically transitioning. The big hot button issue is, of course, the medical transition, which the left supports and Republicans do not support. So what she means by be who they are is allowing little boys to undergo puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, have their genitalia cut off of their bodies in service of this new identity, become lifelong medical patients for the rest of their life with a multitude of complications because these are experimental procedures. That's what she means by be who they are. For girls, she means undergoing puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, double mastectomies, having a skin off your arm flayed off during surgery, made into a phallic shape so that you can have male genitalia or something resembling male genitalia, and having that attached to your privates. That's what she means by allowing kids to be who they are. See, when we strip away this really nice language of kids know who they are and they know who they want to be, and we talk about what it really means, how it's really implemented, do you see how the image changes? And I'm going to be really graphic here. For those of you who don't understand, I sort of explained how a girl undergoes that sex reassignment surgery. Let's explain how a boy gets that done. He's going to have his genitalia cut off. He's then going to have a hole opened up in his private area. And if you're thinking, Amala, that's not naturally there. You know, there's no female anatomy in there. How does one keep that open? They're given a dilator that they will go home with, and every single day have to put a dilator in this hole that has been opened up in their body to keep it open. Now, you can imagine a hole just randomly being placed in your body. There's probably a lot of different medical complications that happen with that. Yeah, some people have it closed up. Many have infections. The dilator is extremely painful. Of course, there's nothing natural that's happening for a woman happening down there. So you can imagine all the different medical complications that happen with that. So when she says allow children to be who they want to be, that's what Michelle Obama is talking about. Again, stripping away the language really changes what that means, and it changes how beautiful the sentiment actually is.
I'm going to stop again right here to make another comment. The young lady said it best. A lot of these politicians have speechwriters that take complicated issues and try to say it in a way that does not mean what they're actually saying, if that makes any sense. So I love what she just did right there, is that she took the veiled language that was being used by Michelle Obama, and she actually just put it into layman's terms for the people who didn't quite know what exactly they would be supporting if they voted for people in that party and people with that agenda. This is mutilating a child's body, whether it's a little girl or a little boy. This young lady just framed it in a way that actually explains what that means. It's not a talking point that solely gets a claps, applauses and claps in the audience. This is an actual agenda that's being pushed to shift and confuse children into changing their sex. And so for me, I'm of Christian faith, and I know a lot of people claim they are, especially in the Black community. How do we consciously go along with that type of agenda and still call ourselves Christians? How do we not think that one day we may have to answer to God for being an accomplice, meaning we voted for that type of policy, for that type of understanding, for that? Now, Michelle Obama's, a very great speaker, and her husband's a great speaker, and they're well presented. And there's a part of us that feels proud when we see, Black people being depicted in an educated manner, but also we can't judge the book by its cover until we know what the heck's in the book. These people are the spokesmen and women for evil, it seems like. How are you standing up for an agenda that mutilates a child's body and changes their sex as if God made a mistake? And how do we, as quote unquote Christians and believers, support such an agenda by voting people like that in, or people who think like that in? The Bible encourages us to be compassionate towards people who are different, but it does not necessarily tell us to condone behavior and to condone policy and to enact laws that enable people to violate God's laws. So I love the fact that this young lady saw through all that veiled language and was able to effectively break it down for the audience so people know exactly what's being said, even though the statement she made didn't have this level of depth to it. It just was a veiled statement that sounded good. But when you actually break down to the nitty gritty and you actually look into what policies this means and what it actually means real time, which she broke down, little girls are essentially having their body mutilated. Boys are having their members cut off, and then holes are being drilled inside of them so that they can simulate having the anatomy of a female when it's not a natural thing for them, and the subsequent actions they have to take to ensure that the hole stays there, and then all the affiliated medical complications surrounding that procedure is stuff that does not get discussed when we're just talking about it. But in a way, we are to be held responsible when we actually vote an agenda like that in. This is nothing personal against Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, or anybody along those lines. This isn't, I'm not, attacking anybody in that sense. I am saying, though, for the people who say that they believe in certain things, make sure you have an in-depth understanding of what you're supporting. Again, these people are well represented, but what agenda do they represent? What exactly are they trying to get into play, and how does that actually impact your life? That's something that needs to be considered. And this young lady is simply saying, look, like, I see through it. You're an inspirational woman. You've done a lot. You've overcome a lot. You've made a career for yourself, and you went from not having much to having a lot. And that's something that's aspirational. But I see through the veiled language to see what you actually represent, and what you represent doesn't align with what I believe. So I am going to bring truth to what's actually being said for those who can't make that distinction. That's interesting. Now, again, this is Generation Z. They see through the BS. They don't play with that. So, it's interesting how sometimes we think people are not getting it, and they do get it. This young lady seems to be calling it out. Let's continue.
Now she says, for being who they are and for loving who they love. How many of you knew your sexuality at like 4 years old? Any of you? No, probably not. You probably maybe had a crush when you went to preschool, and you thought, oh, Sally's really cute, or, oh, that kid, Chris, he's really cute. I think I have a crush on them. Do kids really know what that means? Do they know what their sexuality is? So why are we concerning ourselves with who children love and promoting this idea that children just love who they love and they are who they are? And that's why we should have these conversations about sexuality and sexual acts in their schools, which is what's happening. So when you see parents go to school board meetings and they're saying, I found pornography in my child's library book. And maybe they shouldn't be looking at images of two men in bed together, and they shouldn't be reading a description of what sexual acts look like between heterosexual or homosexual couples. That raises a red flag for me. And then the Michelle Obamas of the world will look at you and say, we shouldn't be demonizing our children. We want them to be who they are and to love who they love. It's a lot different when we strip away the language and talk about how these issues are actually being faced in our society. Talk about why we are actually discussing these things. It has nothing to do with not wanting a child to be who they are. In fact, it has everything to do with preserving what a child actually is, which is an innocent being who should not be having these conversations, who should not be confused in this way, who should not be concerning themselves with the ideas of gender or sexuality. It is, in fact, the preservation of what children are and the preservation of the love that children are supposed to experience, which is an innocent, non-sexualized love. So they will run on this platform for who knows how long. And these are going to be like the real sticking points. It's going to be about racism. It's going to be about LGBTQ issues. It's going to be about things like abortion. But the implementation of these things, when covered in all this beautiful language, is actually segregation and separating people based on race, telling poor, Black people that they have it harder than poor white people, telling people of color in general that they don't live life on easy street while white people do, segregating people in their schools, segregating them in programs, allowing certain people to be at the top of the leaderboard when it comes to jobs and affirmative action and college scholarships and all of these different things, and alienating others. So they'll say it's beautiful and we're doing things for race. Instead, they're implementing racism. They'll say, I'm pro-choice. I want women to be able to take care of their bodies. I want them to be able to do all these wonderful things and set a path for their life. What it really means is we offer free abortions and free vasectomies outside of the DNC, which is a little too much in your face. I can totally understand wanting to be pro-choice, but is it something that we need to be shouting from the rooftops that we've just received an abortion outside of the DNC? Probably not. And they'll talk about children loving who they are and accepting themselves and loving who they want to love and being who they are. What it really means is gender transitions, and talk of sexuality with children who are too innocent to have those conversations. So don't be fooled by the language, and don't be fooled by Michelle Obama. I know she's so charismatic, and so is Barack Obama. And I see a lot of people saying, I miss the days of Barack Obama because he had so much character and he was truly presidential and he had so much tact and, he really knew how to speak to a crowd and how to represent this country. But look behind the scenes at the things they're actually supporting and what they're actually pushing forward, because I can guarantee you behind the charisma and the lovely face and the character is actually very bad policy. And Michelle Obama made that abundantly clear in her DNC speech. And those are my thoughts on that. After Michelle Obama's Barack Obama's presidency was like, Michelle Obama, she's cool. She's stylish. She did that whole get out and play thing with the kids and was like talking about fitness and just was really like a classy first lady. But then you hear her ideas and you go, oh, wait a second. Same shit, different day. I don't need that. We don't need that. And again, her DNC speech totally emphasized that. But she is sort of seen as this like untouchable force on the left, and is just seen as like such a classy woman who has all these great ideas. The most educated Black woman in America is what people call her. And then you lift off the veil a little bit and listen to what she has to say, and just know that it is no good.
There's the show, folks. Please follow this young lady. She is a very, 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 very insightful young woman. And I'm actually encouraged to see people like this out here, not because she's critical of Michelle Obama or a particular party, but because she's actually policy-minded. She's open-minded. She's a voter that's willing to be persuaded, but she's looking under the veil to make sure that whoever it is that wants her vote is actually speaking to her values and actually catering to what she deems to be reasonable, responsible, and right. And unfortunately, she's not seeing that in Michelle Obama. It's as if the veil is being taken off of the well-presented, great orators that they are. They're great speakers. They're obviously accomplished and educated people, but that education is being used to dupe a lot of people. It's almost when you have a spokesperson for evil and it sounds really good. Meanwhile, it's not really good. They just polished it up to look good, So, it's something to look at. Again, people are going to make their own decisions, and I encourage you to just do your research and to really look into things before you make a decision. It reminds me of when I was younger and I was in class. I had a teacher come in. I might have been third grade, and she did an experiment with the class. She brought in a box that was wrapped in this beautiful wrapping paper. And then she brought in a box that was wrapped in newspapers. And for some reason, she asked everyone, which of these two boxes is more valuable? And naturally, all the kids who saw all the boxes with the beautiful wrapped paper all raised their hand and said the box with the beautiful wrapped paper. For some reason, I said to myself, there's got to be something more to this. Because I thought there was candy involved and I was just trying to get some candy. So I'm like, this is a trick. This has got to be a trick. So in my mind, I was like, no. If everyone's going for the box that's beautifully wrapped, I'm going to go for the box that's wrapped in newspaper. So I raised my hand and said the box in newspaper. And the teacher actually called me out and said, you're right. The most valuable box is the box with the newspaper. It actually has more substance in it than the box that's beautifully wrapped. Then she proceeded to open a box, and there was candy in the box with the newspaper and nothing in the box with the beautiful wrapping. And the lesson that she was trying to teach the children in that class was that you should never judge a book by its cover. Sometimes people come and they present well. They will have the nicest clothes. They will speak the best. They'll be the most educated on paper. They will look like the best thing since sliced bread, but they're empty inside. They're hollow. There's no substance. And I'm not saying that that's the case for Michelle and Barack Obama, but the substance that they represent is not good. Anybody who could sign their name to something that they know is inherently not good, or anybody who could think mutilating children and changing their sex is good, or presenting little children to perverted adults who want to come in there dressed inappropriately as a means of, luring these children into a lifestyle. That's not good. That's just not good. You don't have to be, the wisest person in the world to figure that one out, right? This is not an ideology thing. It's not it's just not good. Like, it's people who prey on little children is not good. And people who encourage or make a way for that to happen, they're not good by association. So to me, any type of policies around things like that, I don't support. And this young lady is telling you she don't support it. So I just want people to, at the very least, if people are going to ask for your vote, let them at least know what matters to you. And if you're not the type of person that support that type of agenda, don't cast your vote for people who do. Otherwise, when you do cast your vote, those people will come into power and those people will enact laws that enables that type of thing to happen. And before you know it, you're going down to your school board complaining, how did this happen? Why are these books showcasing pornographic imagery to my 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old? Why is it appropriate for my child to do this, to read this? That's the repercussions of enabling people who have that type of agenda to come into office. And so this young lady was saying she's not a fan. And so she's changed her perspective. She's told you that she was once a fan, thought highly of of Michelle Obama, and she's very accomplished. There's plenty to praise about her as a person, but the agenda she's representing should also say something about her character. And so you got to weigh, a person who's developing an environment that may not be how you want your child to be raised. Are they equally at fault? That's a question that each individual voter is going to have to make for themselves. And people have their own belief system. I just encourage you to really get on your knees, talk to God, and ask him, is this the agenda you would want me to support? Because if I got an answer for it one day, would I feel proud to say, yes, I helped to enact laws by voting someone in whose agenda that helped children mutilate their body? You may not want to say that. So if you do, that's up to you. That's something every man's going to have to answer to their maker. So with that said, I thank everyone for joining me on this show today. It was an insightful conversation. I commend that young lady. Again, support her, channel. And also I encourage people, do your research. Don't just pick the box that looks nicely packaged. Make sure it is something substantive in there, right? Don't judge the book by its cover. All right. With that said, thank you all. For those who haven't liked and subscribed, I encourage you to do so, and to, stay connected and join the conversation and let your voice be heard. All right. Have a good one.